And welcome back to another video, and I'm dedicating this video to you beginner guy that wants to start your own mobile auto detailing business, because I'm working on my course. And as I said in my last video, as I'm working, so often I come across these little nuggets of what I call wisdom. It's like, oh my God, I wish I knew this when I was first starting out. So what I'm working on specifically is my course. As I told you, it's called Smart Startup, a smarter way to start. So right now I'm working on what I call the operating manual. So in simple terms, what is the operating manual? Well, I've labeled it as operating like a pro, even as a beginner. Now, how is that for a compelling subtext? Who would not want to operate like a pro even when you're a beginner? I know I would have raised my hand and said, oh, hell yes, Darren. So what I'm working on specifically is a series of questions. So let me set up a little context for you. And I hope to impart a few nuggets of wisdom to you, beginner, if in fact you are a beginner. And if you are a beginner and you are interested at any level, check the link below. It will take you to my website, detailvault.com. You can get on the wait list, so when I do release this course. But while I'm working, I'm going question number 8. So let me set up a little context for you. One of the disadvantages of a mobile detailing operation, which is one of few, by the way. There's many advantages of starting out that way, but one of the few disadvantages is this. You do not have the ability to see the car in person before giving a quote, because 99% of the time you're going to get calls on the phone and you're going to have to give a quote to someone because of course they're going to want to know how much you charge. But you can't just say, oh, I charge $200. Well, what kind of car do you got? What if they show up with a full-size SUV, it's black, and they got 5 kids and 2 dogs and 2 cats, and you're screwed, and not in a good way. So you got to ask questions. Why do you ask questions? So that you can take information and create what I call a high-resolution picture. So for example, like actually I'm not going to start out with question number 1. I'm going to start out with question number 2, which is, okay, and pretend with me, I've got someone on the phone, like, okay, great. Tell me about, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I'm going to ask you some questions about your car. So what kind of car do you have? Well, Darren, I'm talking to Johnny customer here. Well, Darren, I've got a Chevy Tahoe. Yeah, I've got a Chevy Tahoe. It's like, okay, great. Can you tell me a little bit about the Chevy Tahoe? This is me talking to you, not him. So what I would say is like, oh, okay, Chevy Tahoe. Can you tell me what year that Tahoe is and how many miles are on it? Oh, okay, it's 5 years old, Darren. It has 50,000 miles on it. Okay, great. So you go through a series of questions. The goal of the question process is so that you can hone in and go from what I would call that initial information is low resolution. I'm going to call that 640 DPI. Okay, I want 1080 DPI by the time I'm done with this person on the phone before I deliver a quote spread. I never give a hard price, I give a spread. So when I go through these questions, there's 12 of them, then that will allow me to create in my head a high resolution 1080 DPI picture in my head, so then I can then give an appropriate quote that will allow me to be profitable. Hopefully I'll get the job, but you won't know that yet. But that's the goal, is you're never going to get the job until you can deliver a quote to them. So question number 8 is one of my strategies. It's really a question in disguise. So for example, let me give you 2 options. I want to ask a question, which is this: has your car ever been detailed before? That's what's called a closed-ended question, which is they can answer with a simple yes or no. No, it hasn't. Yes, it has. Okay, that's kind of useful, but not really that useful. I want more useful information. So I reconstruct the question and I ask it with what I would call the assumptive question, which is this: when was your vehicle last detailed? Okay, now this is starting out with a clean slate, meaning I did not ask that first question. I've only reconfigured the question so it's open-ended and it's assumptive, meaning I'm asking a question assuming that they've actually had it detailed before. When in reality, I know that 60% of my customers or potential customers have never had their car detailed before. And as a beginner, you'd be like, well, then why do you want to ask that question, Darren? Well, that's what I want to unfold before you. So I ask it this way: when was your vehicle last detailed? Now yes, they could say, oh, I've never had my car detailed before, and that is a no, which there's not much left to do with that. Okay, because the other questions are going to help you dissect the moment and create the high resolution picture already. But this is a question in disguise. That's why I do it, or I ask it in the way that I do, which is, when was your vehicle last detailed, as opposed to, have you ever had your car detailed in the past? Because that's a yes or no. I want no, I haven't, Darren. It's never been detailed. Okay, fine. Time to move on to question number 9 and 10 and so forth. But let's say they say, oh, yes, actually I have, Darren. It was about, because I asked, when was it last detailed? Yes, I had it detailed. It's been about 3 years. Okay, that is a window of opportunity, because part of this process is not, or let me rewind that a little bit. In simple terms, but oversimplified, is that you're trying to figure out what you're going to be working on and create by getting the information through asking your questions. You're going to form this picture so you can deliver a quote. But really, there's way more to this process, and that's about building rapport, developing trust, displaying your professionalism, displaying your competence as a detailer. So there's way more that goes into this, and that's what I would call intangible soft skills. So, but let's get back to this point, which is the question in disguise, because now the window of opportunity has just presented itself, because let's pretend Johnny customer says, yeah, I had it detailed about 3 years ago. So in my head, as an experienced detailer versus a beginner like yourself, it's like, okay, cool. I wonder why he's not going back to the last shop or the last guy that detailed his car. There's got to be a reason, meaning, was he dissatisfied? Or maybe he's just a price shopper and he never goes back to anyone again because he's always chasing the best price. So this allows me the opportunity to start flushing out that kind of information so that I can get into the headspace of my potential customer that allows me to be more profitable. Because I can be more profitable the better I am at assessing a vehicle through question and answer, asking and answering on the phone. Because I can't see it in person. So he just said that. So let's say, oh yes, Darren, I had it detailed about 3 years ago. Okay, great. I'm curious, why are you not going back to the same place that you did previously? You know what? The guy's out of business. Or you know what? I lost the guy's number. Or you know what? I wasn't happy with his job. Oh, really? Okay, so can you tell me, like, what about his job were you not happy with? Because really what I want to do at this point is create a separation between the overall experience that that person or that shop delivered versus the actual results of the detail itself. I hope that makes sense to you, because one is about the overall experience. One is about the skill set as the detail experience or the detail itself. So for example, let's say he says, oh, you know what? The windows there's lots of smudges on the windows. And it's a pet peeve of mine, Darren, when they don't roll the window down and get that top little edge of the window that goes up into the door jamb. It drives me crazy. And he's a detailer, and yet he didn't get that. And you know what? He didn't clean the inside of my moonroof. The glass has got this haze on it. I thought he would have got that. So just overall, I wasn't very happy. It's like, okay, great. I can tell already that I'm dealing with a customer that's got a pretty decent eye for details. Not hypercritical so far, but it's got a decent eye for details. That's going to tell me some information. But that also allows me to dig in a little further and ask additional questions. For example, like, oh, okay, so it sounds like he just didn't meet your expectations as far as the quality of the detail. Were there other things about that service, though, that you did like, or maybe that you didn't like? Now what I'm talking about is the overall experience, because maybe the customer, Johnny customer, would say, you know what, the guy was 10 minutes late. I work on a pretty tight schedule and I didn't really appreciate that. Okay, that's part of the experience. So this is allowing me to dig in. And by the way, if you can do this in a natural way, people will actually really appreciate it. As a rule, you can just accept that most people love to talk about themselves in their world. So if you can do it naturally, you will get all kinds of information that you can use. You're going to understand your customer better. You're going to understand their expectations better. You're going to understand the vehicle that you're dealing with and the specifics of it. You know, what color is it? How does this customer use that vehicle? Does he go off-roading in it? Does he have 3 kids? Does he have 2 dogs? Does he use it as a work truck, even though it's an SUV? So the more you can create that high resolution picture, when you get to that point of the conversation where you're about to deliver the quote, the better you are at doing that and assessing, which allows you a greater opportunity to be more profitable. Because if you find out that it's going to require more and more work because the customer is giving you more and more information, and now this picture is becoming more and more refined, and you're like, oh my God, I realize this is even, the more this guy talks, the more I realize it's going to require more and more work on my part, which means that in my mind, the price is continuing to go up and up and up. So I don't underbid myself. So I don't deliver a price of like, oh, based on what you told me, I'm going to give you a price quote of between $350 and $400. When in reality, when I see the vehicle firsthand, it's like, oh my God, did I screw myself? This is clearly a $500 detail job because I didn't ask enough of the right questions. I did not get enough of the right information, and now I've just screwed myself in a not a good way. So that's part of this moment, and that's part of this question specifically is the assumptive question. And also I will add this. So let's just walk this out a little further, this hypothetical moment. So we know the guy had it detailed previously. We know he was dissatisfied with the previous service. Hence he's coming to you, possibly. Maybe it's just all a big disguise and a big ruse, and he's just price shopping and just doesn't want to tell you that. So he's fabricating this story so that you don't realize that he's really a price shopper. But let's just pretend we're not going to apply the cynical eyes in the moment. We'll pretend he's being honest. And so you know that it's been detailed before. So as a beginner, I know what I would do. I would say like, oh, this guy could initially, if I heard that he had it detailed before, I would jump to 2 conclusions that are just really you can't rely on those assumptions, which is, oh, this guy's willing to spend money on detailing services. That is a good thing. He probably really cares about his stuff. Ergo, his stuff probably isn't trashed. And that's the second conclusion. Like, oh, if he had it detailed 3 years ago, it's probably going to be in better shape than the guy that's never had his car detailed before. Well, both those assumptions, you can't rely on those. And that's what a beginner would do. And that's what I would have done. But see, here's the caveat, the warning, which is this. If he took it to a shop and he was dissatisfied with, let's pretend that that's legit, and he starts mapping out some things why he was dissatisfied, because in reality, you may be cleaning up another person's mess, another detailer's mess. They could have been sloppy with the wax. They could have left polish in it. Let's say they polished it. There could be all kinds of problems that if you don't dig in that moment by asking the right questions and getting that information out, you may roll up to a vehicle that you thought was going to be a $400 moment, but now you're spending an hour cleaning up the previous detailer's messes because you didn't ask the right questions. So that's one of the things that no beginner's ever going to think about. Like, oh, wow. Because most beginners would come to the conclusion like, okay, cool. He's had it detailed previously before. He wasn't satisfied with it. This is my time to shine. But you're not factoring in like, oh, this guy could have used garbage products. He could have been sloppy as hell. And now I'm going to, for example, let's say he used industrial strength dressing on the inside and he slathered it everywhere, and it's like a 1/4 inch thick, but now it's like a 1/2 inch thick. And yes, this is hyperbolic, but maybe it's like a 1/2 inch thick because it's accumulated so much dirt and dust along the way in the 3 years since he's had it detailed. And now you're going to have to be dealing with that problem. You're like, oh my God, no one taught me this. And I had to learn this the hard way, which is me saying, yes, I had to learn that the hard way before I figured out the right questions to ask so I could really hone in. I could really create this high resolution 1080 DPI knowledge, and then I could deliver the price. Okay, Johnny customer, you know what? Or I should clarify that. Okay, Johnny potential customer, based on what you're telling me, I'm going to quote you between $450 and $500. And then you wait for a response. which I'm not going to tell you what I do with that response, and that's a video for another time because I've already consumed 15 minutes of your world, and hopefully I've applied a little bit of wisdom. And if you are a beginner, you like what you're hearing, first off, leave me a comment below. What part of that resonated with you as a beginner? And maybe it's something as simple as like, oh yeah, I would have never thought of that. Or, oh, you know what? I got burned by not asking the right questions and I had to learn the hard way myself. Whatever. If nothing else, maybe you could just give it a thumbs up. But if you are interested, by all means, go to the website, sign up, be the first to be notified when I have open enrollment. With that, I'll leave you there and I will see you on the next video.